Good afternoon on today's Angry Alien Bulletin.
And was anybody above us that passed us like 30 seconds ago?
Number 71 Papa Golf negative.
Okay. Something. A UFO. Yeah.
Have any targets up here? We just had something go right over the top of us. It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing, moving really fast.
All of this and more coming at you on the Angry Astronaut right now. Good afternoon. Once again, welcome to another Angry Alien Bulletin. Been a little while since I've talked about UFOs on this channel, and there's been a lot of stuff that I've been researching and have tracked down, and I do my best to try to find sources that can be confirmed. That is to say, government sources, that sort of thing. I'm not trying to dismiss UFO reports that are made by the average person. I really think that those are very legitimate. In fact, lots of them anyway are. And some of the most spectacular and credible accounts I know are made by just plain ordinary citizens who happen to be minding their own business one day and see something quite extraordinary. In fact, not that long ago, I myself spotted something I couldn't explain close to a British airport. So, that having been said, though, it is easier to confirm the authenticity of a report if it is being made by some government agency. Not to say that I trust government agencies implicitly. Yeah, the Pentagon certainly has been known to lie to the American public on a regular basis, but still, there is some accountability there. If they do lie, there are consequences if that's ever found out. Well, at least in theory, there are consequences, and so they have to have a very good reason to cover up the truth or to lie about a particular case, a particular UAP case that they can't explain. So that's why I go after these types of accounts, and I'll tell you, there's a surprising number of them out there. And even though it might appear the government agencies do their best to debunk any sort of accounts of UAPs, at least trying to provide some sort of mundane explanation for them, and they certainly never try to claim that it could be an extraterrestrial craft or the product of a technology that's non-human. Certainly, you're never going to see a government agency make those kinds of claims, but if they say that they can't explain it, then you know that chances are it's a pretty legitimate claim, that it's a very mysterious one. And one in particular, or rather a series of incidents, have involved the FAA, commercial airliners, and a number of encounters, some of which happened in Oregon, others happened in the American Southwest, in Arizona and New Mexico. And there's a surprising similarity between all of these accounts, especially if you talk about the FAA traffic, the radio traffic between the pilots and their corresponding ground control in whatever airport they happen to be operating out of. It's very interesting to hear just how similar these accounts actually are. But before we get started on this, I also want to quickly talk about our Patreon exclusive channel real quick. If you aren't interested in this, you can just skip to this point in the video. But if you would like to support this channel, let me tell you what that means for UFO enthusiasts, because I can conduct and carry out 6 trips a year if I have the support of 1% of my subscribers. Now, those trips are not exclusively oriented towards spaceflight types of events. One particular trip that I want to go on is to the National Archives. Why is that? Well, it's because there's a lot of UFO accounts, including stuff that was made by the CIA decades ago, that sort of thing, that have yet to be digitized, including things like film, photographs, all kinds of interesting stuff that I have been waiting for the archives to digitize. And month after month, every time I go back, the same accounts still sit there with an error message saying, this footage has yet to be digitized. Gets frustrating. And so I'd like to actually go to the National Archives in person and get this content for you immediately. I'm tired of waiting for the National Archives to get around to digitizing this stuff. And also, who knows how much stuff is there that they don't think is worth digitizing, but might be very interesting to see. In any event, if you're willing to support this channel on Patreon, which you can do for as little as 10 cents a day, well, that's a benefit that you'll get if you're a UFO enthusiast who doesn't necessarily enjoy spaceflight topics too much. And just to give you an idea of how much this actually is, I went to the grocery store and got a couple of things. For the same cost of becoming a member of the Angry Astronaut Patreon channel, you could get 2 bags of crisps. Of course, 2 bags of crisps aren't going to last you very long, and they're going to make you kind of fat like me. And so, it might be a better idea is to go get yourself a bag of oranges. Of course, 5, 6 oranges, however many of this are, that's not going to last you very long either. And then once you're out of oranges, well, you're no longer getting the vitamin C that you need, and so you're going to develop scurvy. So you're not going to develop scurvy by supporting the Angry Astronaut Patreon channel. So you're going to avoid getting fat. You're going to avoid getting scurvy. But there's one other thing. A big benefit. If you start eating oranges and eating a lot more healthy, get yourself looking, fit and trim, etc., you may eventually have a need for condoms. And the cost of being a Crew Dragon member on the Patreon channel, on the Angry Astronaut Patreon channel, is the cost of 4 condoms. And of course, as we all know, 4 condoms isn't going to last you an entire month, which of course, the same amount of money will get you an entire month on the Angry Astronaut Patreon channel, which, by the way, has all kinds of unique and exclusive content. And then once you've run out of condoms, what are you going to do? Well, if you run out of condoms, it's very possible that you're going to get a disease. But if you join the Angry Astronaut Patreon channel, you're not going to get a disease from that. So join the Angry Astronaut Patreon channel, and you will avoid becoming overweight, you won't develop scurvy, and you won't get a disease. Now, even though these encounters occurred several years ago, it is the similarity between the encounters and also how many of them occurred between 2018 and 2021 that made them especially interesting to me. So what happened on February 24th, 2018, between 3:30 p.m. and 4:15 p.m. local time, a Learjet 36 called N71PG, or that's its call sign, belonging to Phoenix Air, and also American Airlines Flight 1095 and Airbus A321 had independent close encounters with the same strange craft flying at around 40,000 feet. The planes were flying east at about 37,000 feet between the Sonora Desert National Monument and the New Mexico border when the incident took place. So the initial report came from the Learjet asking Albuquerque Center if traffic had passed above them.
And was anybody above us that passed us like 30 seconds ago?
Number 71 Papa Golf negative.
Okay. Something. A UFO. Yeah.
Now, a few minutes later, the Albuquerque controller asks American 1095 to let him know if they see anything pass over you here in the next 15 miles. The American Airlines pilot replied sort of quizzically and asked if anything passes over us. The controller responds, affirmative. We had an aircraft in front of you at 37,000 feet that reported something pass over him, and we didn't have any radar targets, so just let me know if you see anything pass over you. And well, sure enough.
It's American 1095. Yeah, something just passed over us. Don't know what it was, but it's at least 3,000 feet above us. Yeah, it passed right over the top of us.
Now, a moment later, the controller asks American 1095, could you tell if it was in motion or if it was just hovering? The Airbus pilot quickly replies, I couldn't make it out if it was a balloon or whatnot, but it was just really beaming light, or it had a big reflection and several thousand feet above us going in the opposite direction. And once again, the controller could not track it. There was nothing on the radar scopes. Once again, a lot of the larger weather balloons these days can be tracked on radar, and oftentimes they have transponders too, so a bit odd. Now, shortly after that, a pilot asks on the frequency, quote, "Was it a Google balloon?" To which AAL 1095 replies, "Doubtful." Then another voice comes in on the frequency and says, "A UFO." The whole event, as far as we know it, only took a few minutes. And by the way, here's the spacing between the two flight paths of the respective aircraft. As you can see, there's actually a substantial amount of distance between them, and yet both of them saw the object. Now, if this was just some kind of weather balloon, well, I'm going to give you an idea of just how brief an encounter between a weather balloon and a commercial airliner actually is, and how narrow the window of opportunity is for these objects to spot one another. Pretty amazing. Now keep in mind, the area where the incident took place is very well known to be highly active with military aircraft and possibly some sort of clandestine aircraft that remain under the cloak of secrecy, which could explain why they didn't show up on the radar. To the east, you've got White Sands Missile Range and Holloman Air Force Base. To the south is Tucson, where throngs of military aircraft operate out of two major bases, the Davis Monahan Air Force Base and the Tucson International Airport. To the north, you've got Phoenix and Luke Air Force Base, which is a major training installation for the F-35 and also F-16 pilots. Then you have Yuma and elaborate range complexes that surround that particular base, and so on and so forth. There's actually quite a lot of military traffic. Of course, we are talking about military traffic that isn't respecting commonly used commercial airline flight paths, or not announcing that they're in the area, aren't giving any sort of indication that they could present some sort of a hazard, just kind of flying around rogue, which doesn't seem to be consistent with military procedure. And the most interesting thing about this case is it wasn't an isolated incident. Just 4 months earlier, up in the Seattle area, this happened, or at least this is the account of an airline pilot in the region who put his experience on Reddit. And this has, by the way, been confirmed by the FAA and the Pentagon. Quote, "Just landed in Seattle coming from the Bay Area. Beginning over southern Oregon, we kept overhearing Seattle Center attempting to track an airplane with no transponder who wasn't talking. A handful of crews were able to track it visually. Best that they could tell is it was between 35 and 37,000 feet northbound. Nobody close enough to see the type. Last we heard, it was over the Willamette Valley northbound, and some fighters, perhaps out of Portland International Airport, were scrambled to go take a peek. Center had trouble tracking it on primary radar. Strange, my theory is they were running drugs to Canada. No news yet that I could find." And then later on, there was an update. The gentleman I spoke with said that they initially got alerted to the aircraft from Oakland Center, who was painting it on primary, which means illuminating it with radar but without transponder transponder information. For whatever reason, they couldn't track it themselves on primary radar, and that's when I overheard them using airline aircraft to track it visually. The last airplane to see it had to descend into Portland and lost sight of it. The fighters were scrambled out of PDX and flew around for a little while, but did not find it, and that's that. Now, apparently there was extensive radio chatter about this incident. However, all the links that go to this particular radio chatter are now dead links online. A bit odd, but in any event, TWC.com and their reporters decided to investigate this incident a little bit more thoroughly, and they talked to NORAD. And NORAD was surprisingly informative. Apparently, an incident involving multiple airline crews, air traffic control, and F-15Cs from the 142nd Fighter Wing based out of Portland did occur. According to the limited information that NORAD supplied, airliner pilots were asked by FAA air traffic controllers to help track and possibly identify a white aircraft, whatever that means, traveling in the flight levels nearby, roughly between 35 and 40,000 feet, the same altitude as our other encounter, based on the radio recordings. NORAD also said that the incident did result in F-15s from Portland being scrambled to investigate, but by the time they got up and looked around, the mystery aircraft couldn't be found. Now, 3 months later, after a Freedom of Information Act and some more research, more details of this encounter became apparent. Apparently, Oakland Center Sector 31 first detected this target at around 4:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and they said that the object was moving very fast at 37,000 feet when it was first detected. The intruder quickly dropped off of radar, and that's when the visual sightings by the airline crews began. They continued for roughly half an hour and over hundreds of miles. The exchanges between nearby pilots and air traffic control regarding the unidentified aircraft were constant in the audio. Once again, I can't find these records anymore. All the links are dead, with the same description coming back time and again, that of a white aircraft cruising at around 37,000 feet, but it's too far away to see what type or if it had any markings on it. And then at approximately 27 minutes and 30 seconds into the recordings, they get their first indication that there are F-15s out of PDX about to scramble, with the air traffic controller noting this while talking to another FAA controller, during which time the controller also reiterates that there has been no radar contact with the aircraft. The controller also repeatedly asks air crews nearby to check their traffic collision avoidance systems for the aircraft, which all come back negative. The F-15s first appear on radar as they climb out of Portland to the south at time index 3333 as rock flight, a common call sign used to alert F-15 stationed at PDX. Alaska 439, another airliner involved, asked for an update on the unidentified aircraft, and the controller notes that they still have nothing on him, saying colloquially that it must be a kind of stealth mode or something. It's also interesting that the F-15s first went south when it seems that the object would have been north of PDX by the time they finally took off. In addition, there was a series of conversations later on between the FAA and the pilots who were involved in the chase. The most interesting one was the pilot of Southwest Flight 4712. He noted how strange the encounter was and said that it never seen an aircraft like this in 30 years of flying jets. He noted, quote, "If it was like a Lear or a private jet type of airframe, I probably would not have seen it this clear. This was a white airplane and it was big, and it was moving at a clip too because we were keeping pace with it, and it was probably moving faster than we were. It was a larger aircraft, yeah, but he couldn't really describe the type, configuration, anything. But again, this thing wasn't appearing on radar and it eluded pursuit." Now, all of this is very interesting in itself, but in addition to that, several years later, in 2021, this happened in the skies over New Mexico.
We just had something go right over the top of us that, I hate to say this, looked like a long cylindrical object. It almost looked like a cruise missile type of thing moving really fast.
That was an American Airlines flight passing over New Mexico on the way to land in Arizona. And once again, the news reporters who broke this story checked with the FAA, who told them that yes, indeed, the incident did take place, but that they should check with the FBI of all people. Oh yeah, and they also said that they couldn't track the object on radar. So what are we to conclude from all of this? Well, with all of these bizarre encounters, all of these aircraft involved, and with nothing being successfully intercepted, nothing being tracked down, even by aircraft that are dedicated to homeland defense, fighter planes, supersonic fighter planes that are supposed to be able to intercept and track these things down, something very strange is going on in the skies over the western United States, something that I don't think anybody has been able to explain yet. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, please subscribe. Also, again, please consider supporting this channel on Patreon. And as always, stay angry about space.